Final session of the third interview symposium, paper presentations of Near-Monies and CBDCs. We have two papers and we have strict timeline to 30 minutes each, so I hope your presentation is 15 to 20 minutes, so we have some time for discussion. I am discussant on the first paper called A Money View of Near-Monies, Coupons, Gift Cards and Loyalty Programs by Matthew Harris, an independent researcher. And then Ádám will present his Rise of the Central Bank Digital Currencies, and the discussant will be Larissa from Oliver Wyman Forum. I look forward to both of these. I haven't received any material from Matthew, but I will react to the presentation. So Matthew, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for having me, Asgeir. So let me share my screen. Okay, so this is going to be my presentation on Near-Monies, and we're going to look at three specific cases of Near-Monies, that being coupons, gift cards, and loyalty rewards. Before I get into the nitty-gritty of it, I'd like to do like a little show and tell, if you will. And so look inside your wallets or your purses and see how many of these things you have yourselves. So maybe you have a little punch card from your morning coffee shop that you go to. Perhaps you have some gift cards. The holidays just happened, so maybe you got some of these from your friends and family. And perhaps you yourself are a thrifty person, and so you have a bunch of coupons rattling around in your glove compartment. So why did I decide to look into near money at all? I saw sort of a double standard when it came to popular talks about inflation. When the crisis happened in 2008, Obama did QE, and a lot of people ranted and raved and said, "You're going to turn America into Zimbabwe. This is going to cause hyperinflation." And instead, we had like what, a decade of 3%, right? So the QE didn't really cause a whole lot of inflation, did it? And it got me thinking a little bit about a double standard happening. So whenever government prints money or creates money, there's all this outrage about it potentially causing inflation, but there's significantly less about whenever the private sector creates money. Some people, they complain about banks creating money. They're a little bit more enlightened, but perhaps they're just thinking that banks are bogeymen. Either way, there seems to be a double standard, at least in the public discourse, between this stuff. And it got me thinking, well, if government printing causes inflation, what about coupons? What about corporations just printing out coupons? Is that going to cause inflation? And that's what got me to think about this. So what is near money? And we're going to start with an easy inside-outside distinction. So Amazon gift cards are money inside Amazon, but not elsewhere. We need to go a little bit deeper than just that, though. We can say that near money doesn't circulate even on the inside. We can sort of call it single-use money, if you will. Why near money matters? Why study funny money? Right. Well, the first reason would be completeness. The basics of the money view are mostly covered. There's still many things that are kind of left unstudied and unanswered, but frequently the focus is sort of at the top of the pyramid or international finance, big stuff like C6 swap lines, repo, all that fancy finance stuff in the corporate finance world. But there's a lot of stuff on the ground that's left unstudied that is more related to everyday experience. And I think because a lot of the focus of this stuff in money is related to banking or government and not so much the everyday consumer experience, this adds to the alchemy of banking. This adds to the mystical quality of money. And while Harry does a really, really good job of explaining away the alchemy of banking, experience often teaches us better than explanation. And so this is another pedagogical approach that can be taken to help students. And this leads me to my third point, is just demystifying money. When we talk about banks creating money or government creating money, it's often met with befuddlement. But whenever a business issues you a punch card, you don't think that's magical, right? The alchemy of banking kind of, the mystery of banking kind of goes away right there. It doesn't meet with as much befuddlement. So let's get to the balance sheets. Coupons. Here we're going to start with, this is just a starting position. We're going to have a consumer with some cash, a grocer with some goods, a producer with some deposits. In transaction one, we're going to have an expansion of the balance sheets. The producer is going to send out some coupons, print them out, and the customer is going to cut them out. In transaction two, we're just going to have a purchase. Oh, sorry. One moment. In transaction two, we're going to have a purchase of some goods, and this is going to be a mixed payment using a mix of cash and coupon. Nothing too fancy here. And in transaction three, we're going to have the coupon being sent back to the producer. So the grocer sold goods at a discount, under value, and they need to get refunded. And that's what's happening here. When I was a cashier, at the end of the day, we took all of the coupons out of our till, we gave them to the head cash, and the head cashier sent them back to the producer, and the producer would send a refund. And that's what's happening here. The grocer is getting a refund from the producer for the coupon. And also what's happening here is a contraction of the balance sheets. So money creation, money destruction. Coupons and inflation. Could printing out coupons cause inflation? Short answer is no. And the reason why is because these are unenforceable liabilities. So the grocer can just say, no, we're not accepting that coupon at any point in time. Okay, these are not very enforceable. But let's do some funky neoclassical stuff, right? Let's just assume that away, okay? And let's assume that perfect competition, so that marginal price equals marginal cost. And we're going to say coupons are printed in excess, okay? And there's definitely evidence for coupons being printed in excess. About 500 billion are printed every year, but less than 10% get used. So there's a huge excess in coupons being printed, okay? Let's introduce a run on the business. Let's say the coupon is really, really good. It's like a 50% off gas. If it's 50% off gas, you're going to run to use it, okay? Marginal cost of the coupon program is going to go up as more and more people redeem them. And so the marginal price of the product is also going to go up. Otherwise, the company closes, okay? So while in reality, no, coupons would not really cause inflation, there is this theoretical corner case that, yes, I'll hand it to the neoclassicals. Okay, it could cause a hike in prices on the good. Moving on to loyalty rewards. Okay, transaction one, we're going to have an expansion of the balance sheets, but it's going to be a little bit different. We're going to have just a regular purchase of goods for cash. Okay, so you're going to go to your coffee shop, you're going to buy some coffee with cash, and on top of this, the retailer is going to issue you some points, and this is going to expand the balance sheets. Okay, so we have points being issued on top of this transaction. In transaction two, we're going to say you're a repeat customer. You really like their coffee and you like their loyalty program. So you're going to go back and you're going to spend your cash and you're going to spend all your points. And you're going to do this for some new goods. And this is going to cause monetary contraction. The points are all going to go away. Now, can we see inflation happen with loyalty programs? Yes, there are certainly case studies of this happening. On the left-hand side here, I have one case, that being the green stamp program, which I believe was in the early 1900s. More recently, we see it with the air miles program. So when air miles were first issued, they actually equaled a mile, and they were issued by your airline provider. But since it's been associated with credit card companies, competing credit card companies, those credit card companies have competed to issue more and more air miles, and an air mile no longer equals a mile. So we do definitely have case studies of it causing inflation with the loyalty program. The interesting thing for this to me is sort of the where of inflation. Everybody occasionally gets caught up in what is inflation. Is it about higher prices? Is it about devaluation? Occasionally, we all get befuddled by this at one point or another. So tentatively, I'm just going to call this inflating the outside and devaluing the inside. So with coupons and gift cards, they're pegged to the local currency. Okay, so a $2 coupon is pegged to the dollar, right? A $2 coupon for shampoo is pegged to the dollar. From coupons, we can see that price increases can happen across multiple instruments on the same peg. So if a price increase in shampoo were to happen, this would affect both the value of the coupon as well as the dollar. Happens across the whole peg. With loyalty programs, though, since these are their own denomination, unpegged to the national currency, we see that it gets devalued instead, which I think is interesting. And this also is an important decision for corporations when they're creating their marketing scheme. They need to decide whether to peg, such as with a coupon, or not to peg, and have their own denomination. This kind of mimics, if you will, Triffin dilemmas about optimal currency areas. What's the I think that's interesting. Moving on to gift cards. So in transaction one, we're going to have an expansion of the balance sheets again, but how it's done this time is very similar to when you purchase deposits from a bank. So in this case, instead of buying deposits with cash, you're buying a gift card with cash. And a gift card is basically just a deposit at a retailer, but it can't go anywhere else. That's the difference. It's limited in use. So here we have a swap of cash for a gift card. And this is an expansion of the money supply. And transaction two, you're going to use that gift card to purchase some goods, and then the gift card is destroyed. The cashier normally cuts it up, unless it's like a refillable gift card, something like that. Pretty simple, pretty easy. Now let's get to the inflation part. Could gift card purchases cause inflation? No, not at all. It's not going to budge par or budge the price of goods whatsoever. The interesting thing for me about this was comparing accounting sheets to accounting identities. And we just had a huge kind of conversation about this, more or less. But I've tried, so everybody here knows about the formula for the quantity theory of money, MV equals PT. It's a very simple formula. Here we have some very simple balance sheets, and these balance sheets have been confirmed by experimental tests that are reproducible. I've tried matching these balance sheets and the quantities therein to this formula, and I haven't been able to make this formula work. I can make it work for the first transaction. I can't make it work for the second. I can't make it work for both. If you want, you can take a screenshot of this, do it as homework, but I haven't been able to make the quantity theory of money formula work with balance sheets. And that's been interesting to me, because in here, you're purchasing money and this doubles the money supply. And
So
here the money.
left.
5 minutes left? Perfect. Okay. That's enough time. So 3 instruments, 3 results, quick summary. So can coupons have inflation? Short answer, no, but under very specific theoretical conditions, yes, it could cause a price hike across the whole peg. Can loyalty programs have inflation? Yes, it appears that competitive issuing does cause the denomination to be devalued. This has no effect on prices in other denominations, however. Can gift cards have inflation? No amount of gift card purchases changes par or the price of goods. Okay. So I do have some other things on expanding the money view as well. I'm just going to combine these 2 slides together. I think looking at near monies and applying balance sheets to near monies has also made me think about applying it to various other types of instruments throughout history, and perhaps the future as well. I think cash has been understudied, and I'm currently working on cash as well. We could look at company script. This was something that happened in company towns, and is a very interesting historical case. Traditional monies, game currencies, such as WoW Gold, and the connection between the real world economy and the virtual game economy. That's been talked about a little bit, but never from a money view perspective. And probably the strangest thing, but the one that I'm most excited for, is applying it to war medals. Yeah, it can go pretty far if you stretch it. Here I have 3 links, which I'll share in the chat. My whole presentation has been based on a blog post that I wrote but never published, and it has some interesting extra information in there, which I'll put in the chat. Here's a link to Currency and Empire, which is a group that talks about money as well as colonialism. Really good resource. They also have a really good map on money and different topics. And IMTFI, which is another good resource that I find for an anthropological view of money. And they talk about a lot of different monetary instruments there as well. And I'll share those in the chat. And that's my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Matthew. I will do some quick reaction first, and then people are already starting to raise their hands. Like first thought, relating to the session we started with today from Africa, and with the interesting peg between currencies. I'm wondering, are you somehow pegging the discount coupons or the loyalty cards to the real currency or not? Here, my points would be that coupon is a discount in reality, like if you go through it, and then it was like traditionally discount transformed from the producer through the grocer and on actual paper slips, while now in the electronic world it can be more easily done without having like these checks of it. And definitely, if you're giving a discount, that should not cause an inflation as we understand it in the monetary economy of the for the lack of better word, the real monies, if that is dollar or whatever dominated price of the discount is. on the and I think that the same goes for coupons and gift cards. While loyalty programs can be seen as discounts also, they have more of a how to say, money-like features in it. I'm not sure that I'm convinced that they create inflation as such in the monetary economy, but there can definitely become an inflation in the mileage program. And that's why you're only getting half a mile instead of a full mile in flights, those who remember the flight programs from the beginning. And then there is a currency exchange rate of like how to use best the miles you have to buy for them. But then I haven't read about it. I saw an article about it. Then there has been actually a financialization of these flight points program, and that's linked to the low price airlines and the discounts. And I think then the value of the loyalty program somehow for investors or owners of the airline companies, not the customers, is derived from the customer base, if I'm getting it right, and that people started to collect these, and it became some kind of a liability then on the airline to use it. But if airlines go broke, there is no deposit insurance to secure your points, and there could be a run to use them on buying something else. It's an interesting thought experiment to think about different natures of money, and I actually used it in my teaching as example with a coffee card, because there actually, if you buy a prepaid coffee card that is stamped, you are actually acting as a bank for the coffee seller, because you're giving him money up front for 10 cups, and then you draw on them during the week or the month, and then he doesn't have to borrow money somewhere else, and that's why he's ready to give you the discount there. So that's a financing cost. But there are many ways to look at this. I'm gonna open the floor maybe now for other questions, and then you can react in the end, Matthew. So Dennis, you have a question.
Yes, I've got two questions. If Near-Monies do not circulate, then what about reserves at the Fed? Does that circulate? And then my other question was, on that last slide of yours, you had a few pictures there, and you mentioned war metals. Why do you think that one is interesting? Thank you.
Jay?
Yeah, I wanted to just bring this super interesting video that I posted, which relates to airline miles, which basically almost says that airline miles are acting like central banks, because they can control the issuance and the redemption of the airline miles, which is their control of both supply and the way how demand is handled, which is a super interesting concept. And when the airline miles were in crisis, these airline loyalty programs were worth about 10 times the actual airline assets in terms of the real assets, quote unquote. So this is something we should probably study in terms of maybe advancing it a bit, because it brings in sort of the banking aspect and how, under what conditions, the redemption, supply and redemption kind of works. That's a really interesting application. So if you guys have time, watch that video. I'd really also like to see what Matt has to say once he's watched it. That was just a comment, just a pointer.
Yeah, thank you very much. So I'll start in chronological order with Asgeir's comments. So yeah, the coupon is a discount. I actually had this conversation on Reddit with somebody as well who said that you can think of the coupon as a discount. What my balance sheet show is that it's not really the same as the discount, and this is also confirmed by my experience in working in retail as well. A discount, when you're a business and you do a discount on an item, you just change the price tag itself, right? But coupons are actually being used as a form of payment. And so that's quite different than a discount itself. These are acting as a form of payment rather than as a discount. I can think of one weird actual instance that happened when I was shopping at a grocery store that I worked at, and it was buy one, get one free. And we also had a coupon for it as well that was like half off bread. And we went there, we used the coupons for half off, and it was buy one, get one free. And when we grabbed 2 loaves of bread, the cash register just opened up. We didn't pay for it per se, but it just opened up, and it said that they owed us a penny, which I found was very interesting. We hadn't given them any cash or anything like that. Is just they owed us a penny. Very interesting sort of glitch with how it was done. I wish I remembered that example in more detail. But no, coupons are not discounts just because they are a form of payment, whereas a discount is actually just reducing the price. Moving on. So near money as money that doesn't circulate, and what does this mean for reserves at the Fed? It's really interesting because when we talk about money in circulation, it's a little bit hard when it comes to credit, because credit isn't a physical thing like water that always circulates. It can just come in and out of existence. Sometimes it's a bit hard to describe it as circulation, but the interesting thing about Federal Reserves is that they don't really touch the real economy of goods and services. So like you can, going back to QE, you can actually like produce like a ton of reserves, and it wouldn't necessarily affect the CPI at all, because bank reserves are used for settlements between banks and not for purchasing goods and services. So you're not going to change prices in the CPI at all. So that's my comment on that. And for war metals, why that interests me the most is it's really complicated, but my interest is in going to the origin of money. And we know now that money doesn't come from barter, but I don't think we've fully understood the ramifications of that, because when we talk about real GDP or the real economy, underneath the veil of money, we're really talking about this hypothetical barter economy. But if that never existed, or if that didn't exist if we didn't have markets when money was first around, what does that mean? So money originates in social relationships, and when we look at coins, when coins were first minted in ancient Greece, they were given by the temple as sort of war metals. Now this was ancient history, but more recently in the USSR, everybody got paid the same. And another way that the Soviet government incentivized people as a substitute for paying them cash, they gave them medals. So they gave them medals for being a very good blood donor. They gave them war medals. They gave them medals for all sorts of things. And these were social achievements. But I think that's interesting because this was a substitute for cash payments. And so I want to explore war medals. The numismatics community, people that talk about coinage a lot and collect all kinds of rare coins, they also often collect war medals as well. And so war medals and the is connected to money a little bit through that way, but also through war finance. And last but not least, thank you, Jay, very much for that video on air miles. I plan on looking into air miles more after this. It is on my writing list. Thank you very much, Jay.
Thank you, Matthew. And exactly on time. So now I hand the floor over to Ádám to present the rise of the central bank digital currencies.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for the opportunity. It's a great pleasure to be here with you as a presenter. I'm the last presenter of this symposium. I hope you can see my slides.
Yes, put it on full screen and Jay can put down his hand. So.
Okay.
I'll give you a time when there's 5 minutes.
Okay. Thank you so much. So first introduction, why this topic is important. Major central banks like Fed has policy mandates. Fed has policy mandate for employment and inflation. Other central banks has a mandate only for the inflation. And you can see on this chart, on this slide, an economist cover page and also data which shows how the inflation, the mentioning inflation, the term inflation decreased, while other topics like climate change and inequality, digital currencies increased in speeches of the central bank decision makers. And
I can see the first slide.
Okay, sorry. I think it's better if I just go like this, and maybe you can follow this. So this is the second slide that I wanted to share when I mentioned that influential voices called not only on Fed but other central banks to address critical policy issues like climate change, racial injustice, inequality, public health. Why, in legal terms, the policy mandate in the case of Fed was only domestic employment and inflation, but other central banks also like inflation. And that is when digital currencies came into attention. And I'm going to very fast go through this slide because yesterday we had dedicated much time on the pros and cons of the digital currencies. I would like only to show a meeting chat from yesterday evening, or maybe after the session, when Matthew mentioned that in case of central bank digital currencies, there is going to be no bank runs. One of the presenters, Sophia, mentioned that that is the opposite. That could be even worse in a digital sphere because that could happen in a blink of an eye. So that is also what I think is very interesting. And in this slide, you can see that before 2019, and I think that is a very important date, the average of the mentioning referrals of the CBDCs were in negative stance. Negative, you can see it is with color red. And the blue means that if the central bank governors, vice governors mention the CBDC in a positive correlation. And since 2019, you can see that the line, which is the average, is reached the zero. And since then, the CBDCs are more often mentioned in a positive term. And this is just a quick personal slide, which I would like to share with you my motivation and inspiration. And that both goes to the YSI events. The first, when I met the topic in person, it was by presenting Andrés Arauz, who was, according to the Financial Times, as you can see in this picture, a front runner and a CBDC advocate. And the second time also relates to the YSI, when I first presenting about CBDCs. That was Asgeir's class, when I had the privilege to be one of his teaching assistant. And let me get back to my presentation. So how the emergence of the CBDCs took place. One of the main rationale behind it, that was the metaverse, the private digital currencies like Facebook, now DM's Libra project, which also put this topic in the focus of the central banks. Today, and this is which I take from today's database from the CBDC tracker. you can see that almost everywhere in the world. And also we have heard this morning a presentation about the central bank digital currency in Africa. So that is also a topic there. And but I think that's after 2019 when the central banks decided, and when I use the term empire strikes back, when they decided, okay, that is the final point of the private digital currencies, and we as the central bankers should come out with something. And again, let me refer to the Financial Times, actually 2 Financial Times articles. In one of them, it was, as Perry just mentioned before this panel, Zoltán Pozsár's op-ed from the Financial Times, when he mentions that there is a network of central bank digital currencies which could take the place of the dollar. And also, which Jay shared yesterday, that the Brazil and Argentina might come out together with a joint currency, which might be a central bank digital currency. I'm not really read a lot about this, but this might be also interesting for us. And the final part of my presentation will focus on the 3 different countries. The first is the USA, where the current governor mentioned that you wouldn't need cryptocurrencies if you had a digital US currency. And since this is my paper was finished last year, and that was the latest available paper, was the report which was issued by the Fed Reserve, and also there was a Project Hamilton, which honors not only but 2 Hamiltons, Alexander and Margaret Hamiltons. Margaret, the last time when I checked, she was still with us. She is 87 years old, and she used to be a computer scientist on the Apollo project. And that is a joint research initiative with MIT and Boston Fed. And if I go to the Euro area, you can see that the European Union also started to launch its own digital currency. The ECB investigated the Digital Euro project, but they put a cap, a so-called 3,000 euros, which could be a cap per capita. And this might be also be introduced on a couple of European countries which has not introduced the EU euro, like Hungary or Denmark. And what's happening in China? China used to be the first major economy to pilot the digital currency. And when the paper was submitted, so last year, it was already 11 regions which tested it, and also during the Olympic Games, that was in practice. And also they could finance the One Belt One Road project via this solution. However, CBDC proposal, the Chinese CBDC, differs in 2 ways. Which one of them is the could trace and monitor the individual transactions, which is a subtech solution. And what is the other, which is might be relevant, is that it's not issued directly by the People Bank of China, but through other companies like China Mobile and payment platforms like Alipay. And my final part of my presentation, and in the paper there was the most important figure. You can see two maps. One of them is the trade exposure, and the second is the financial exposure. And you can see that China is regarding trade is still the 3rd major country in the world after the Euro area and the USA. But in terms of financial exposure, they are lagging behind. But if I refer get back to the Brazilian and Argentinian joint currency, you can see that Brazil already was exposed largely to the Chinese economy back in 2019. And since then, the situation is getting more complicated. And an example with the war, you can see this data, which was shared with a colleague of us, Ilya Viktorov. He kindly shared it with me, so Larissa couldn't have the chance to check this this data because it was not in the paper. That you can see that after the war, the green color refers to the transaction via Chinese yuan with the Russian trade financing, and you can see that from zero it became this, it has reached like 30% of the total amount of the transaction. And let me conclude. So because of the big tech companies, there was a paradigm shift in the regulatory tasks. CBDCs became more and more important topic of the financial system. And this could already challenge the dollar-based monetary order if that could happen. And thank you for your attention.
I'm very well also, and I look very much forward to hear Larissa's comment because I really enjoyed her presentation yesterday as well. This was, in my view, a good overview of the situation of the CBDC. This is an important topic to follow for the money viewers. And yeah, before adding any of my comments or questions, Larissa, you are the commentator on that. Unmute.
Okay. Thank you, Ádám, for the presentation and for the overview. Agree with you on the motivation. I think my comment is similar to the one that I made yesterday on highlighting the differentiation between wholesale CBDC and retail CBDC. I think keeping those distinctions can be helpful to then start painting the picture of like what is what in the hierarchy. And I think in that discussion yesterday, some people raised the point of like, oh, wholesale CBDC, aren't those just reserves? And I think that they're just reserves in the same way that retail CBDC is just cash. It is similar, but it's different in the technology. And it's important to see what does the technology bring that's unique and different. In the case of wholesale CBDCs, it's the tokenization of reserves. So all of a sudden, it's the merging of the network and the transfer of value and like the messaging. It's a possibility of the means of payment coexisting in the same network as different types of assets. So I think that that can bring potentially new funding models in the sense that if you think that the dollar is important because it's also a mechanism of coordination of, of all of these different flows, all of a sudden you don't need, if the information is organized differently, you might have different models of coordinating. You may have different different ways of matching cash flows that don't necessarily, or at least like decrease open up different models. I'll say that. I think that there's many more questions and much to be explored. And I think once you go into like the retail versus wholesale CBDC, it's interesting. It kind of like opens up a lens to seeing more of what the US is doing. The US hasn't been a part of like these multi-currency CBDC projects. But it kind of announced very, very quietly. I can say this was very easy to miss because someone at the Fed made a comment in a conference in June saying that there was a wholesale CBDC project under the New York Fed called Project Cedar. And there was also with very little fanfare, they announced the completion of that project. So even in like the CBDC tracker, you could argue that the US is at the pilot or proof of concept stage, because they had this 12-week project called Project Cedar, where they were doing simulated FX spot transactions. And then They later announced that they're going to go from simulation to something a little bit more, because they're going to be working with the MAS, again, to create a shared platform where they're exploring like cross-border wholesale payments across multiple currencies. And then I know that Dan mentioned it, and I've been debating with Dan about how important this is on like the regulated liability network. Again, this is not a wholesale CBDC, but it puts intention around like, oh, you see the banks coming together, coming up with their own model of like tokenizing deposits. Like, how will that coexist, and to what degree will there be tension with the wholesale CBDC projects that are being led by the central banks? So I think we're going to see a lot of more exploration and experimentation with potentially different models. So that would be my suggestion of next step of like where to expand a little bit more on like that color on the wholesale CBDC, because I think you got the retail CBDC part of the story. I think I would agree and not necessarily have any additional comment.
Thank you, Larissa. Maybe me throwing in 2-3 points, and then you can maybe react, Ádám, and if hands are not popping up, we can then maybe move on to Jay's wrapping up. I think I need to watch also like Larissa's presentation from yesterday again, and I am, because I've been moving, like being like really believing in CBDC and then becoming at least more skeptical of that, at least that it needs to be, you know, blockchain based or crypto or whatever. But I think there are interesting 3 points I want to point out. First, there might be some kind of a hybrid or bridge between the wholesale and the retail through the trade finance, you know. So I'm trying to link to Kiko's, you know, and point to the future. You know, and I've seen some innovation project there, you know, that you can actually use some in between of wholesale and actual retail in pocket of people, you know, in the trade finance. And then I think something we need to think about in this respect, and it hadn't been thought through, but it's this point of pegging, you know, when we peg something to something else, and if the digital tokenization are supposed to be some central bank peg electronic versions or whatever. And here I'm thinking also about from yesterday or the first day of how Hong Kong was crucial, and I think this will need to be studied historically now soon, how the Hong Kong dollar was the exit from China, but being pegged to the US dollar. So that's kind of so there's some hybrid in betweens that are where things happen. But then my final point, and I think most important point of where things might move quickly on the retail side of CBDC is actually what I've followed from the ECB, the European Central Bank, and even a discussion in the European Parliament that I think are available on the Commission website, that this could move things quite fast and quickly and being implemented, you know, for the payment system of, you know, real people, real 300 or 500 million people, in a more kind of a success than the EU one. And I think this is also related to trust and spreadness of the core in the single market behind it. But I'm just speculating here now, so I wish the recording had been stopped. But throwing up some pointers for a follow-up, and I give the floor to Ádám to react if nobody is raising the hand. We are tired on this end of the third.
Thank you, Asgeir, and thank you, Larissa, for very constructive comments and food for thought. I think I don't have anything to add now. I think Jay mentioned that we should start the wrap up in the chat. Maybe Jay, you wanna stop recording or?